All right, everyone, got to talk about Bernie Sanders' idiocy some more. It's an easy topic because there's a lot of it to talk about. Here's the thing, though. Like, first and foremost, some people are like, well, you really don't like Bernie Sanders. Yeah, because as a Vermonter, it's a little bit more close to home for me. Here's this Brooklynite, basically, who moved here in order to bilk people, and he's just sort of, lodged like a parasite in the ass of our state since the 1970s. So yeah, it's a little bit more personal than, somebody from somewhere else representing like fucking New Mexico or something. It's like not my problem so much, but Sanders has directly impacted my state's well-being or lack thereof for a long time. We got to talk about his feigned slippery slope argument with regards to felon voting, and what Sanders is saying is, well, if you start taking votes away from one group of people, it's a slippery slope to take them from others. And I'm thinking to myself, there is no such fucking slippery slope. He's being totally disingenuous. Look, he's classically educated enough and politically aware enough. You can think what you want about his specific views, but he's in politics. He knows damn well there's no slippery slope on this fucking issue and never has been. There have always been classes of people within this country who are otherwise legal citizens of the United States who have been prevented from exercising their so-called right to vote because there are certain people that are not given that right. It's just like the Second Amendment. Now, would Bernie Sanders apply this to the Second Amendment and say, well, there's a slippery slope taking guns away from violent felons to taking them away from other people? Well, yeah, I guess on that you could make that argument. But I don't hear any of the Democrats saying that. They're just talking about voting rights. But the thing is, criminal lunatics have never been allowed to vote in the history of the United States. It was just they just unilaterally took your ability to vote away and threw you in an asylum back in the old days. Of course, we don't do that anymore. If a person has committed certain types of crime, certain felonies, or certain particularly violent higher level misdemeanors, I would say, the founders that made the Constitution, that designed this country lock, stock, and barrel in the first place, would never have thought it was proper for those people to vote. So with the Boston Marathon bomber, that was used as an example that Kamala Harris, I believe, was totally flubbed. She says, yes, you should have this conversation, you should be allowed to vote. Buddy Meemail says, no, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. He's right. Broken clock in his case. His last name, extremely unfortunate. No, he shouldn't be, because he would have been classed as a lunatic. He wouldn't have been classed. The idea that lunacy is not intertwined with criminal behavior would have been a foreign concept in the mid to late 1700s. In fact, it would have been a foreign concept really until the last half a century or so. It was just sort of taken for granted. Now you may say, well, that's in retrospect, well, that's not true. Depends. If a person has certain violent proclivities, is there really any difference between saying that and saying, well, they're a criminal lunatic? Not really. This person has violent fanatic compulsions. In the case of the Boston Marathon bomber, it's Islamofascism. In the case of others, it can be other things. No, there's no slippery slope. It's never been used as a precedent, well, this lunatic can't vote, therefore this person who's otherwise totally sane and did nothing wrong shouldn't be able to vote. The only time that kind of slippery slope has ever been enacted is with gun control, and it's Democrats doing it. And it's always been Democrats doing it. Look up the Cruikshank decision, 74 or something like that. The Democrats were already trying to disarm people 150 fucking years ago because they were afraid black people would actually exercise their naturally given rights that they gained after the Civil War was over from the government. They're like, oh my God, these black people will vote. They'll get guns. We won't be able to bully them around. Quick, get the Ku Klux Klan. We need to talk to the judge. And so they enact the first gun control in this country, the first meaningful gun control that didn't involve, again, criminal lunatics not being given a fucking black powder pistol. The only other meaningful gun control, the birth of it for reasons other than criminal lunacy or for current internment in an actual asylum or prison, the only other starts with the Democrats 150 years ago. But nobody's ever said, well, this lunatic here is incapable of even walking around normally without having a mouth guard on because he's fucking Hannibal Lecter. Maybe we shouldn't let him decide the course of our country in a civic context. Nobody ever has said, well, yeah, that makes sense. And so also these groups of people shouldn't be able to vote. Again, the Democrats were the ones explicitly trying to prevent people from gaining any civic authority or representing themselves. They did that through gun control, in part with the Cruikshank decision. It's funny how these two things are so hypocritically intertwined and always involve a bunch of fucking desperate authoritarians who seem to gather under the Democratic Party's umbrella, loosely at least, doing stupid shit in order to try to prevent people from having a good time or doing their civic duty. Based on, now they do it based on the color of skin, too. It's just they aim it at white people, because, they're just antagonistic towards us now, I guess. I find it hilarious how Bernie Sanders is such a fucking hypocrite. So he's either inept and doesn't understand the history of gun control, the history of voting rights. He's just basically like, well, I marched with Martin Luther King once, so you should listen to me. Fuck you! Who cares who you marched with? That was a long time ago, Bernie. That was a long time ago with that picture of him, which is admittedly funny, of him getting arrested. He's got a shit-eating grin on his face. He thought it was funny. Again, probably did it for opportunistic reasons. Did he even do it because he cared about civil rights, or was he just sort of there because he was a commie revolutionary? Who knows? The world may never know. Very funny. Very funny indeed. There's no slippery slope on voting rights. People saying, well, they took the rights away from... I would agree. Certain felons should be able to vote. Yeah, he was guilty of some white-collar crime. Who cares, dude? But if someone would have been classed by the founders, basically, would George Washington have thought this person is intelligent and sane and rational enough to vote? Because again, the country was founded under the auspices of the idea that when sane and rational, educated individuals take part in a civic context, it makes a good country. They very rapidly expanded that to mean like the average Joe, the working class and stuff, and eventually, you have universal suffrage for all people. But if someone is currently in prison for something that would have been considered a form of madness, they were never allowed to vote to begin with. They would have until recently been locked away in an asylum. They don't vote in asylums. If you're out on the funny farm, you're not voting. Because you can't take part intelligently in the civic context. That's why we don't allow people to vote before they're 18. Arbitrary number, of course. That's why we don't allow people to vote if they're severely demented and don't even know their own name. Nobody hands them a ballot and says, okay, fill it out. Then an hour later, all they'll have done is scribble on it. So what the fuck? How are they supposed to vote? It doesn't make any sense. And it's different. Some people say, well, they used to use that for trying to deny women's suffrage or something. No. Totally fucking apples to oranges comparison. There's a big difference between criminal lunacy and being a woman. Well, okay, all right, I'm not even going to get into that joke. MGTOW bullshit aside, no, it's Bernie Sanders is being disingenuous. He knows there's no slippery slope. He's just lying to people because he wants to score a point against Trump. Hopefully it doesn't work. Hopefully people aren't taken in by that any more than they are the free bullshit. That's about all. Peace out.